And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Once again, I am your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, and it's great to have everybody here once again on this Friday. Of course, got wrapped up with the football podcast about a half hour ago, so a little bit of a break in between to kind of set everything up for the baseball podcast. It has been a while. It has been a couple of weeks. Last week there was no show because of Black Friday, but we're back. We got some stuff to talk about on the show today, of course, here in the off season now when it comes to baseball. But before I get into that, I just want to remind you guys to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to the following link. That is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show and makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Once again, the link is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So let's get into what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about some of the moves that have been made so far. We'll actually talk about the Mets because they've made some moves, and I kind of wanted to talk about one of them. So we'll get into that. We'll also talk about other MLB moves that have been made. We'll talk about Sonny Gray signing with the Cardinals. So that'll be the first part of the show. Then in the second part of the show, we'll get into talking about Shohei Ohtani and the current updates regarding him and where he could possibly go. Then we'll get into Yoshinobu Yamamoto. We'll talk about where he could potentially end up. The other Japanese star player trying to come over and have success here in the U.S. As Ohtani has so far in his career. And then, of course, we also have Juan Soto trade rumors, which we will get into in the final part of the show. So that's the rundown for the show today. So let's get right into the first topic, which is talking about some of the free agent moves that have been made so far. We'll talk about the Mets because I wanted to get into some of their signings that they've made so far. They've made a few moves. One of them I wanted to talk about, and that was them signing Luis Severino, who previously pitched for the Yankees. So they agreed to a 1-year, $13 million deal. Severino, two-time All-Star, was with the Yankees for 8 seasons. And, the ERA, his career ERA with the Yankees jumped up a lot, especially after last year. 3.79 ERA with the Yankees. His issue last year, it was injuries. The last couple of years has been injuries. At least in 2022, he missed some, parts of the season, but when he came back, he pitched effectively. And it looked like it was going to be the same thing in 2023, but then, that game against the Dodgers did not pitch well, and then it kind of just, spiraled out of control after that. And then, of course, he got hurt again, and unfortunately, that was how his Yankee career ended. So, how his 2023 season went, he started the year on the injured list, of course, with the lat strain, and he ended up finishing with a 6.65 ERA in 18 starts and 89 and a third innings. And unfortunately, he ended the season on the IL with the season-ending oblique strain, and that was on September 8th of 2023. Now, for me personally, I honestly think this wasn't a bad signing for the Mets. And, a lot of people thought, I guess Yankee fans are making fun of the Mets for this. For me, I was like, you know what? I don't think it's a terrible signing. Now, for me, when it comes to the Mets, they're going to have to make, more deals, of course. Because right now the rotation's kind of thin. You got Jose Quintana, and of course you have Kodai Senga, who was very good for them last year. So, they're going to have to make some more moves here. But I think Luis Severino, if you can get, a Severino that, you're not going to get the one you got from 2017, 2018, the first half of 2018. But if you could get a pitcher, that's somewhat of a version like that, or at least a pitcher that's so much better than what the Yankees got out of him last year, he could be a good, middle of the rotation, back end of the rotation guy for them. Because like the velocity was still there. It was really just location. So I don't know if the Mets are going to be able to fix that. We'll see. I honestly hope they do. I hope he does rebound and pitch well, and pitch himself into a bigger contract. I know there's some Yankee fans that have mixed feelings. They're like, well, I don't really care. He's not on the team anymore. But you know what? This guy used to be one of the best pitchers in baseball. He did at one point. My friend sent a thing. I think it was a newspaper. The back page of an old newspaper, and the headline was, or at least something. It was like, who's the best pitcher in baseball, or it was something, and it was of DeGrom and Severino, and of course those guys are no longer. Well, Severino's still pitching in New York, but DeGrom obviously left to play for the Rangers, and now he's hurt. And that's another guy that's dealt with injuries. But I think for me, I think this is a low risk, high reward signing for the Mets. It's 1 year, so if he doesn't pitch well, then they let him go. But this might be his last chance to really prove that he could still pitch. So we'll just have to see, what happens with that. Obviously he's still pitching in New York, and also let's not forget that Yankees bench coach Carlos Mendoza is now the new manager of the Mets. So that also maybe had to have some influence as to why Severino signed, with the Mets. So, he finished in third place in the AL Cy Young voting in 2017 and ninth in 2018. But yeah, he has dealt with a lot of injuries, rotator cuff inflammation and a grade 2 lat strain in 2019. And he really did not pitch that year. He pitched, like the last month or so, and then he pitched into the postseason, but that was it. Tommy John surgery in spring of 2020, returned in September of 2021, pitched in a few games and the wild card round, or the wild card game against the Red Sox. Lat strain in 2022, and then he had another lat strain in 2023, and then of course he had the oblique that ended his season. But it was a rough year for Severino. So for me, I'm hoping that he bounces back and he pitches well, just not against us. That's all I'm saying. And then the other signing that the Mets had was they brought in Joey Wendell, for depth on the infield. I think that's another okay signing for the Mets. This was also, this was a 1 year, $2 million deal, plus performance bonuses. He was an all-star with the Rays in 2021. He did only hit .212 with a .554 OPS in 112 games with the Marlins last year. But, they brought him in for defense. He could play, multiple positions on the infield. His career stats, so he's got a .263 batting average, 698 OPS, 61 steals over 8 MLB seasons. His best season was with the Rays. He had in 2018, he had a 300 batting average and a 789 OPS. But the Mets let some guys go. They let Luis Guillorme go, so I think Joey Wendell is a better player than Guillorme. So they bring him in, and I don't think that's I really don't think that's a bad signing either. But if these are the only signings, and they also did sign a relief pitcher, Austin Adams from the Diamondbacks, the Mets got to do more, of course. It can't just be these moves. Now I think you go out and get, maybe another starter somehow, maybe you get another bat or two, then that only makes these moves better. Right now, these moves are just to, fill out some positions on the team. Obviously, like I said, Joey Wendell's for depth. And then, of course, Severino is, going to have a spot in the rotation. But they got to do more. Like, if this is all the Mets do this offseason, is the Met fans are going to lose it. So, that's just what I wanted to talk about when it came to the Mets. And then I wanted to touch upon the Sonny Gray signing. So the Cardinals bring him in. Cardinals actually have made a decent amount of moves, with their rotation. They signed Sonny Gray. They signed Lance Lynn. They signed Kyle Gibson. The rotation was kind of a weak spot for them last year, so they're trying to improve it. So they bring Sonny Gray in on a 3-year deal, $75 million. That was that's the contract. Yeah, I mean, listen, he did pitch very well in 2023. He was a Cy Young candidate. Actually, we'll pull up his stats from 2023. So he was 8-8. He was third in ERA, 2.79 ERA. Had 183 strikeouts and a 1.15 WHIP, which was 15th in the American League. Yeah, I mean, listen, the Cardinals, they were a disappointment last year. They were. And, listen, Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, those are guys that are going to fill out the rotation. The big signing, obviously, was Sonny Gray. And I think he will definitely help out with the Cardinals. And we'll see how the Cardinals are this year. Next year. They obviously got some more work to do, of course. But definitely bolstering that rotation is a step in the right direction. But again, obviously you look at the Sonny Gray signing as, the big signing of the three. So we'll see how that translates for the Cardinals. But yeah, I mean, the big stars we're going to talk about on the show today, of course. But yeah, I mean, nothing major has happened. I mean, the Sonny Gray move was big, but other than that, we really haven't had anything major happen yet. So we're hoping that happens relatively soon. I think I saw something that said Yamamoto is going to take his time. I think I heard that. I think it was Yamamoto. And obviously we'll see where Bellinger ends up. Ohtani's obviously the biggest name, and then you got where's Juan Soto going to end up. That's why I kind of figured today would be, just to update, talk about the updates on some of these guys and, where they could potentially end up, if they might get traded. And some of these guys, maybe they end up on my team, which I'm really hoping for. But again, I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I'm not going to get too excited because, the Yankees could end up with, Manuel Margot and Kevin Kiermaier. Instead of Yamamoto, we could end up with Mark Meyer. So I'm hoping that that's not the case. But yeah, I mean, once these guys start getting signed, there's going to be a ton of things to talk about. It's just right now we're at that we're kind of in no man's land right now because we're still kind of waiting on, some of these big free agents to sign. So, and hopefully it happens relatively soon because we got the winter meetings and things can happen there. It's gonna be a crazy off season. It's gonna be a crazy off season. So, and that's what you hope for because it gives us more stuff to talk about, of course. But yeah, so that was just what I wanted to touch upon in the first segment. Obviously, in the next segment. We'll give a Shohei Ohtani update. We'll talk about, the recent news regarding him, where he could potentially end up. I did see that some teams are kind of out on the Ohtani sweepstakes. So narrows it down to, less teams, of course. I know my team doesn't really seem like they're in on him. For me, I mean, we'll get into it, but I think he's probably staying on the West Coast. It's just a matter of who it's going to be. So that is what we will do. That's what we'll talk about. We'll talk about Ohtani when we come back from our first break of the show. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.